I'm very happy to welcome Ritesh as part of our research and publications seminar series. Ritesh is uh, a researcher at Academia Sinica, and he's here to present about rationalizable implementation. Ritesh,
Yes, yes. So let me share my
okay,
screen.
over to
So
you,
that,
Ritesh.
thank you. Okay, so thank you, Jeevan, for inviting me. Uh, let
Ritesh,
me now put my web.
we'll have an
Okay,
hour inclusive of question and answers,
okay,
which
okay.
we can have during the talk. Is that your preference?
I don't mind. I mean, it's better
Okay.
if you get the questions within the talk. So I mean,
Thank
yeah.
thank you.
Okay. Okay. So thank you, Jeevan, for inviting me for this talk. So today I'm going to present my work on rationalizable implementation. This is joint with Will Corpella and Michele Lombardi, and I mean this is a topic which I have been working since my grad school. So it's my dissertation follow up on my dissertation work. What is so the pattern of the talk is going to be I'm going to minimize the technical aspects to the minimum, so there will be very less notation and stuff. So if you have questions, I will be very happy to take in as we go along, because that's will help me move along. Let me start with the basic idea of what is implementation theory all about. What am I talking about today? So let us think about a problem of say any con department. They want to elect chair of their department. Usually faculty members may have preferences over different candidates who they want their chair. But these preferences may be different across different faculty members. So they may not actually have a uniformly best candidate in their mind. The head of the school or the dean may have a criteria of social optimality in his or her mind. So the dean wants the faculty members to, in some sense, democratically elect their chair, but the dean wants that it should satisfy certain ethical principles. The issue the dean faces is that the faculty members' preferences are private information. So how does he rely on the faculty members to take this job? So this is one way to put what we call as a mechanism design problem. This is the problem of incentives. The dean really needs to now come up with a mechanism such that these faculty members have no reason to lie in that mechanism. Another problem of mechanism design is the standard auctions problem. So I'm going to concern about this paper is about covers all possible mechanism design problems subject to the mathematical assumptions I'm making. Okay. So basically, the problem is really this: that there is a group of agents who have private information. Let us call them preferences. The dean has a social choice function or social choice rule in his or her mind. So for a given, and I'm going to call these preferences by just I'm going to call this as theta. So the dean does not know this theta. Okay, so he has to rely on the agents to tell him the theta so that he can implement this outcome. So what he does is he asks the following question: can I write down a mechanism? Can I build a game such that when these agents are playing this game, the predicted outcomes of this game are exactly equal to the outcomes which I wanted? So therefore, the game is designed in such a way that the agents cannot, quote unquote, game the system. Okay. Of course, what predicted outcome means in a mechanism will depend on the solution concept we are using, how we are predicting outcomes in a game. How do people play a game? We need a theory for that. Maskin, in his seminal paper, he assumed that, okay, whenever we are talking about a mechanism or a game, I'm going to assume that people play Nash equilibrium. People play according to this solution concept of Nash equilibrium. This is a reasonable assumption, given that much of the game theory, applied game theory, we use Nash equilibrium as a solution concept to analyze the game. Maskin asks the following question: which social choice rules are Nash implementable? In the sense, for what social choice rules, Fs, can I write down a mechanism such that when agents play this Nash mechanism according to Nash equilibrium, then the predicted outcomes of my game are the same as given by my social choice rule. So in this sense, the designer can elicit the private information using a game. Okay. So what Maskin did was he gave a partial answer to this question. He said when there are at least 3 agents, he defined some sufficient conditions on F. He said if F satisfies certain conditions, one big condition was something called as Maskin monotonicity. Then you can design a mechanism which achieves this objective. Okay. Later on, 2 papers which came, independently, simultaneously, were Murray-Ripello and Datta and Sen. They extended the results of Maskin in 2 dimensions. First, they provided a complete characterization. So they provided a complete answer. They gave one condition on Fs such that this problem can be resolved on those specific Fs. Okay. And secondly, they also covered the case of 2 agents. So in this sense, the answer to this implementation problem has been fully resolved when there are at least 2 agents. Okay. Now, where does rationalizability come in all this picture? It comes from the following observation. Whenever we are talking about any game, whenever we are solving any game, we make a lot of common knowledge assumptions. Okay. In particular, when we talk about Nash equilibrium as a solution concept, we make the following common knowledge assumption. We assume that the equilibrium strategy is common knowledge. What it means is basically that agents have correct beliefs. They exactly know what their opponents are going to do. We can also call this thing as rational expectations, that their expectations are, somehow coordinated in some manner. The second assumption we make when we analyze any game is that the preferences are common knowledge. I mean, more or less what it means is that the game is common knowledge. We know what game we are playing. Exactly, I know my utility function, I know your utility function, and so on and so forth. So these are the 2 common knowledge assumptions which are made in Nash. So the second one is made in any game, in any solution concept. The first one is specific to Nash. Okay. I mean, the first one actually has also a name. First one basically assumes that there is no strategic uncertainty. I do not have any uncertainty about how Jivant is going to play. For example, if I'm playing against Jivant. The second assumption is called as no structural uncertainty. I do not have any uncertainty about the structure of the game, what the game looks like. For example, if you are playing an extensive form game, I exactly know how the length of the game, how the tree is structured and everything. So there is no structural uncertainty in any game. So these are the 2 assumptions which are made in the standard classic. Yes.
So Ritesh, just to be clear, so the mechanism designer is the only one with this uncertainty, and the players don't have this uncertainty among themselves.
So these 2 uncertainties are, so the first uncertainty is in the minds of the players when they play a game. This is all under a game.
Okay.
And the second one is,
And what does the mechanism designer know and not know?
So the mechanism designer knows that the game he's designing and the information structure. So mechanism designer knows point 2, that preferences are common knowledge. This is the assumption which mechanism designer knows.
Okay.
Mechanism designer does not know whether there is strategic uncertainty or not.
Okay.
Okay. So one example I can give you, when we do standard auction theory, where you have uniform 0 to types distributed on 0 to 1 and uniform distribution. This is the assumption which the designer knows. And based on this, you are designing the mechanism. That's point number 2 in that setting. Okay. But point number 1 is something which you are making an assumption when you're doing auctions, that people play equilibrium. Okay. So these are 2 different assumptions. Okay. So in this paper, what I'm going to do is I'm going to relax 1. I'm going to allow for the presence of strategic uncertainty. Okay. two reasons. First is that in many environments, player may not have enough information to form correct beliefs. If I'm playing for the first time against Jeevant, I have no idea about what kind of a person Jeevant is. I may not be able to exactly, have this rational expectation. I need some learning or something. I cannot have that. Okay. So this is a more learning based critique of, or learning based motivation to relax one. The second motivation to relax one comes from point 2, which Sriram raised earlier, that suppose I want to relax 2. Suppose I want to say that I do not know whether the preferences are common knowledge as a designer, but I know that preferences are almost common knowledge. I'm not going there how to define almost common knowledge, but more or less, if I want to slightly perturb the assumption made in point 2, then I need to remove, I need to relax one. So that's point number 2. This is Econometrica paper by Ori Tercier. They basically said that when you do mechanism design and you make revelation principle, then you need to basically use rationalizability as a solution concept and study full implementation. So basically, point number 2 gives me information or mechanism designer's robustness objective to justify rationalizability as a solution concept. So that's the motivation of why we are interested in rationalizability. Okay. So there are two kinds of robustness. One is the robustness to learning, and one is the robustness to information, which the designer has. So therefore, in this paper, I'm going to replace Nash equilibrium by rationalizability as a solution concept. Okay. Rationalizability is not a new solution concept. This is a very classic, the first defined in Bernheim and Peirce, and then generalized to allow for correlated beliefs by Brandenburger and Deckel. The information foundations are pretty recent, but people talked about this earlier also. It has been formalized now, this connection between strategic uncertainty and structural uncertainty. Okay. So basically in this paper, what we do is we take the Maskin problem, replace Nash by rationalizability, because this is a natural solution concept if you care about strategic uncertainty and structural uncertainty. And we find this following theorem. If there are at least 2 agents in my setup, so then a social choice function is implementable in rationalizable strategies if and only if F satisfies iterated monotonicity. So we give one condition. This condition basically tells you that if F satisfies iterated monotonicity, then you can design a mechanism in such a way that no matter what is the private information of the agents, this information will be revealed through the messages played in this mechanism. And it says that if you can define such a mechanism, then F must satisfy iterated monotonicity. So basically, this is the one condition. You can put it in your computer, and then you can just check whether F satisfies this or not. Okay. Any questions? Yes.
This is full implementation?
Yes.
Like, so each and every strategy,
outcome,
rational strategy combination that players can play.
Yes.
Each of those, the mechanism will spit something that's in your
F.
In your F of those preferences.
Yes. Yes.
And for every F that is in those preferences, you will be able to find a strategic combination where
Yes.
everybody is choosing a rationalizable strategy. So
yes.
Yes. The outcome of that strategic combination is that there's the
Yes.
element we are looking to map onto.
Yes.
Okay, I see. That's nice.
Yes. And I just want to point out one thing. So this paper, Ori Tercier, I did not put in much emphasis here. But what this Ori Tercier paper says that if you want to be a classical mechanism design guy, where you are just interested in one equilibrium, okay, like auctions, you just say, okay, people play the revelation principle, truthful equilibrium is the right one. There may be other equilibrium you don't care. Ori Tercier's point is that if you care about this assumption too, if you are not sure whether people are, if the type spaces of this uniform distribution or something like that, if it's perturbed, then your revelation principle will fail. And the only way to correct the revelation principle is to study rationalizable implementation, so full implementation in rationalizable strategies. So there is a bridge between mechanism design and implementation.
Right.
So
I see.
Okay, so let me go on to the literature. So so this is our theorem. Of course, we are not the first. Yes.
Is the number of agents, right?
I is the number of agents. When there are at least 2 agents,
right.
F is implementable in rationalizable strategies if and only if F satisfies iterated monotonicity.
Right. And
okay.
Rationalizable, remind me what rationalizability is, that you can have some sort of, can you remind me just once?
So, rationalizability is a solution concept which is defined as so let us look at finite games. For finite games, we know iterated elimination of strictly dominated strategies. That's a solution concept. For general games, we have iterated elimination of never best responses. That's rationalizability. So in the first stage, you remove all strategies which are never best response. So everybody is rational. So I know that my opponents are not going to play certain strategies.
Never best response, as in you cannot have any beliefs such that that strategy.
Irrationalize. Yes.
So you remove those that can never be a best
yes.
response for me.
Yes.
Given that you remove them for me, we look at the ones that you have left, and then
yes.
then we iterate and so on until we get this set of rationalization.
Yes. I'm gonna define it more clearly. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, it's based on this iteration.
I see. Okay.
So okay, so and that's why we have this word called iterated monotonicity. So anyway, so we have this theorem. So before going into the details and what is exactly the solution concept looks like and what is this iterated monotonicity, let me just give you a brief picture of the literature so that you can fit in the contribution of this theorem relative to the existing literature. So as I said that, we are not the first ones to study this problem. In fact, I have studied this problem myself in a different setting. So, but our research question is really started with 2 agents, because most of the previous literature does at least 3 agents. Okay. And I'll tell you 2 agent is why 2 agent is challenging and also why is it important. But let us just see what is done for at least 3 agents. So our research question is at least 2 agents, and we want to find out what this circle looks like. So this circle is really the set of implementable Fs. Okay. Can I put a name to this circle? What is known till now was, so Bergman et al. Was the first paper they did this, Bergman, Morris, and Tertier. They were the 3 people who studied this problem when there were at least 3 agents and under certain more conditions. What they find out is a condition called as Maskin monotonicity double star, which is sufficient condition basically. Okay. Now, as you can see the circle, this is not really, they did not provide a complete answer because there are examples which lie outside the circle from both the sides. So there are functions which are not implementable, but they satisfy MM double star. But there are also functions which violate MM star, but which are implementable. Okay. So therefore, this is the thing. So there are these, only the blue circle is the common circle between the set of implementable Fs and what Bergman Morris did. Okay. Xiang in a recent paper,
this is all in the sense of implementable in terms of rationalizable strategies?
Yeah. Yes. Same problem, like exactly same problem, same setup. So, so set of him, and then Xiang, Xiang 2020, I greater than 3, again, at least 3 agents. He completes the picture left by Bergman, Morris, Tertier. So he kind of gives this circle a name called strict group monotonicity double star. So now we have a name to this circle. Earlier, this circle did not have a name. Now we have a name to this circle. For I greater than equal to 2, we give a name called I iterated monotonicity. So iterated monotonicity in then says unifies the literature, at least that our condition implies all others. Under n I greater than 3, those imply our condition. That's the contribution. So first of all, as I mentioned, that we provide a complete characterization for the case of two agents. In fact, the project started with this. In any of the implementation problem, actually, if you solve the two agent problem, you have already solved the three agent problem, because the jump is from 3 to 2. The 2 to 3 is easy. That's why people do 3 first. And it's not just an esoteric exercise. There are many two agent problems. For example, bilateral contracting. These are two agent problem. Buyer seller contracting. We use these mechanisms. There is another problem called a selection of arbitrators, where there are two agents. They want to select a jury, but there's one jury they want to select. They want to select an arbitrator. You can think about two brothers want to divide their assets or their father's assets or whatever. And there are, so the selection of arbitrator itself has some recent interest in the literature. So two agent problems are very specific, but all of the two agent problems have been studied under Nash till now. So we don't even know how to even start studying rationalizability, because we don't have the baseline or basic characterization. So hopefully we will be able to study these problems in a more in a rationalizability setting. Yes.
Isn't it like trivial to go from 3 to 2 in the following sense, that you just add a third person who doesn't care about anything?
No.
Any of the rules and just use that. So what goes wrong if you do that?
So what goes wrong is the following. So if you have a third dummy person, it only helps you. But if you do not have the dummy person, then you need to solve some extra incentive compatibility constraints. So let me explain you. So we are assuming in this setup that the faculty members know the preferences of each other. Okay, so me, you, and Sriram, we know exactly what is the state. Okay, there are 3 states. Now the mechanism designer can ask us to ask us to report the state. If we all agree on the state, then the dean is gonna just believe us. But if one of us deviate, then he's gonna punish all of us. Then he knows that they are lying. Now, when you have 2 agents, then if one agent says theta and the other agent says theta prime, I don't know who's lying. So you need to have an extra incentive compatibility constraint here. And that's the problem. But when you add a dummy to this problem, then you solve the problem.
Right. I see.
So it's like my word against yours when you are in 2 agents. But when you are 3 agents, it's that chain gets broken. And that's the problem.
Right. I see.
Okay. So that's why these are more challenging, because you have these extra constraints which intermingle with the monotonicity constraints. So you need to balance these constraints in a way that everything works.
Okay.
I mean, you cannot just add incentive compatibility. You cannot add incentive compatibility plus masking monotonicity. Right. That's not work. There is this.
But I'm still not convinced with your answer between going from 3 to 2. So why can't you have one player who is just a copy of the other player? So A and B are copies of each other. So they have exactly the same preferences and everything.
Yeah.
So and there is another player C. So A and C's words one against each other is not too different from A and B both having the same preferences and saying the same lies and using the same strategies, no?
But by copying, you are basically saying that any 2-agent problem can be seen as a 3-agent or more, right? That's what you're saying. You can just add another copy of the agent.
Yeah.
But in the real world application, when you're doing a buyer-seller trading, or you are dividing across 2 agents, then
theoretically solving the problem perspective, why is too much harder than why won't this?
No, the thing is, if you cannot add copies, then this is hard, and then but still we can solve the problem.
Okay.
So
it is not without
My
yes,
perspective.
Go ahead.
Dean is trying to decide between Sriram and Jivant, and then we just add a person just outside, a vegetable seller outside at campus, and say he's also a part of this and solve for this. But I guess the problem with that is that with the 3 agents, that third person can inform the dean. But if I make him completely indifferent, then he's not contributing at all.
See, the third person may not have common knowledge, which we need for this mechanism to work. So you are assuming that this third person also knows the state and he's a part of the faculty and everything. So,
I see. Anyway, I think there must
so,
be, yeah.
but it is clearly, I mean, I can think of a more informed answer but I see adding a dummy player always solves the problem.
Yeah.
But it's basically that you cannot add a dummy player because adding a dummy player is not trivial. I mean, it's a trivial solution to the problem, yes, but it's not that it is without loss of generality, that anything which can be implemented by two player can also be implemented by a dummy. No, that is not true.
Yeah, understood. Yeah.
That is not true. Okay, the second part is the computational part. So the first part is two agent. Even if we are able to add a dummy player, I still have something to say for three agents. So, okay, so if the two agent part is not convincing, so let me add the three agent part. Our approach is basically computational. I have not told you what iterated monotonicity is. I'm gonna explain what it is. But basically our idea is we convert this problem of finding what Fs are implementable and what not. We convert the entire problem and write down this problem as a fixed point problem. Now, how do we do that? That is the whole, I will need like the next session, the next session of this talk. That's the next where I'm going. But this is our, I think this is our main contribution. That this mapping already exists in this previous literature, is somewhere deep down in the proof, but not on the surface. So we uncover this mapping. So this problem is actually a fixed point problem. Now, once we have a fixed point problem, we can study the mapping and see what fixed point theory can tell us, okay, in this setup. So what we have basically found out is that iterated monotonicity is basically based on certain mapping, which I'm going to define. This mapping has a very nice structure. Basically, it has a structure enough such that I can apply the Tarski's fixed point theorem. What it gives me an explicit way of calculating the fixed point theorem, fixed point. So what is iterated monotonicity in this setting is the following. So once I explain you what this mapping is, iterated monotonicity basically says that so this mapping basically is a mapping which takes some b of t to be defined later and gives you another b of t, okay. And this b of t is a complete lattice. R is monotone. These are our results, which I'm going to explain what's happening. Therefore, the Tarski's fixed point theorem applies. And IM basically says that F is implementable if there is a element in this BT, which is a fixed point of this mapping, and F is measurable with respect to this, again to be defined with this beta star. So this is where we are going. We are going to understand what this computational aspect is.
Sorry,
Okay.
how do you define monotone in this setting?
So this is a complete, BT is a complete lattice. So it has a partial order with the minimum, min and sup. So then you have monotone. So so now let me actually explain what it is, because I've just said a lot of things without defining it, but this is the roadmap which I need to kind of fix our ideas. Okay. So let me now quickly go to the formal model so that I can I can get some notation to explain this mapping. Okay. Okay. So we have at least two agents in our setup. There can be 3 agents or 2 agents, 4 agents. Okay. The only thing we are assuming is that we have a finite set of agents. We have finite set of states. And we have a finite set of alternatives. And Y is going to denote by the set of all distributions over X. Okay. Since X is finite, delta X is just a simplex over X. What does a theta represent? A theta basically gives me the utility function for each agent over X. It's like the von Neumann Morgenstern utility function over X. And I assume that agents are expected utility maximizers. So the utility over any element in capital Y or a lottery over X is just the expected utility. So this is just abuse of notation. I'm using the same utility on both the sides, but should not cause any confusion. I'm assuming in this setup that theta is common knowledge among I. So everybody among I, they know theta. So everybody knows theta and everybody knows theta and so on and so forth. That's what I'm assuming. Okay. A social choice function is nothing but it maps a state theta to a lottery over X. A mechanism is a game form where for each agent, the designers describes messages. So MI, MJ, MK, they can be different, they can be same. And the outcome function is basically tells you that given a message profile, the designers picks a lottery over Y. Okay. This is the BMT setup. So everything is done under the Bergman-Morris-Thursier setup because we're all solving, that's the benchmark. Now, solution concept. I'm going to denote by SIM theta as the set of rationalizable strategies for player I when the state is theta, and SM theta is going to be the defined as a cross product across agents I. Okay. What is SIM theta? So Jivant asked it earlier. So SIM theta is defined iteratively. It is defined as iterated elimination of never best responses. So at first stage, everybody deletes their messages which are never best responses. You can call them as dominated messages. There is no belief such that I will play MI. Okay. So every rational player should do that. Now, if every player knows that everybody is rational, then I will never put a positive probability on messages sent by others which are dominated. Okay. So iterating in this way, I should get my SIM theta. So this is how it is done. So at k equal to 0, SIM theta of 0 is just MI. So that's our initial condition. For k equal to greater than equal to 1, I pick up a message SIM theta at k, takes a message in SIM theta k minus 1. It will retain it in the stage k if there is a belief on my opponents such that MI is a best response to these beliefs. Okay, so this iteration has a natural belief restriction inbuilt in it. The rationality restricts your belief, but that's it. You still cannot go to full rational expectations. So, so this is the iterative solution concept. So at each stage, you iteratively delete never best responses, assuming that everybody else is doing this. Okay. A social choice function is implementable in rationalizable strategies, provided that for each state, this set of rationalizable strategies is empty. Oh, sorry, non-empty. And when you take any message in SM theta, the outcome function gives you F theta. So whenever you see a message in this mechanism, it will tell you the state. And then given that this mechanism is implementing F, you know that what outcome you get your desirable outcome. Okay, so this is the indirect way of the designer to get this implement the social choice function. A priori, there is no relation between Nash implementation and implementation in rationalizable strategies, but it will come out. Okay, I mean, from the definition, it is not. Okay, now, okay, which social choice functions are implementable? Now, sorry. How do I solve this problem? Okay, I've given you the definition. I've given you this. Like, how do I come up with this mapping? What is this? How do I start thinking about this problem? So one first approach, probably nonsensical approach, one could say, is that you pick an F and you check all possible mechanisms. You write down all possible mechanisms. If you find one, then you declare F to be implementable. Otherwise, you say F is not implementable. Well, the solution is legitimate, but this is really, just throwing the definition back at you. That's it. It's legitimate, but there is. So I need to cut through this problem, and we need some sort of a revelation principle. The standard revelation principle may work, may not work. I don't know, but I need to reduce the problem to checking only a specific class of mechanisms. Okay. And in a way that I can compute it, at least in a computer. Okay, so that's where I'm going. So let us simplify the problem. Let us assume that there is something called as an augmented direct mechanism, and I'm going to explain. So let us only focus on a specific class of mechanisms called as augmented direct mechanism. This is like a direct mechanism where we add certain other messages. So sorry for the typo. This X should be a union. So an augmented direct mechanism is a mechanism where your messages are your types, so your thetas. So what is the true state? So the designer basically says that, okay, report me theta, report what is the true state of the world, what are your preferences. And he also adds other messages. He can also add other messages, some countable set. Okay, if you do not allow for this countable set, then you are in the direct mechanism. This is the direct mechanism which we use in our standard mechanism design exercise. Okay,
It should be a union.
Yes.
Or,
Union. It should be a union. There is a typo. It should be a union.
So it's not like the designer is saying report your two preferences and also report one of the one element from the.
No. It's not and. It's or. Here, it's a typo. Yeah.
You can report your two preferences, or you can report one of the elements of this countable set.
Yeah. This countable set can be even theta also. I mean, we don't know. We don't know because what this countable set is. Okay. So subject to the typo, let us call this direct specific direct mechanism as D, and this capital D is basically the space of all these direct mechanisms. I say that F is implementable by a augmented direct mechanism if D implements F. D is a legitimate mechanism. So it can happen that D implements F, and for every theta in capital theta, S D theta. So instead of M, all the rationalizable strategy profiles actually lie in the first component of the messages. So all the countable set is happening out of equilibrium, if you would call this equilibrium, of rationalizable strategies. So I will, as a designer, I will only see messages where everybody is announcing a state. So that's the restriction I'm putting. Okay. So definitely I may be able to implement more if I more Fs if I allow for mechanisms which are outside of this augmented direct mechanisms and this definition. Okay. Then
can you explain the second part of the definition a little more? What is happening?
So the second part is saying that you take the message profiles at each state theta, which are rationalizable in this mechanism D. These message profiles should be in the cross product of capital theta. So no countable set is actually announced as a rationalizable strategy at any state. Okay. So now notice that if I have basically restricted my mechanisms and the definition of implementability in a specific way, I can define now I have a language which can solely be defined in terms of direct mechanism. Okay, so everything is in theta. Okay, I know that all the rationalizable strategy profiles are in capital theta, or cross product of capital theta. So this is just bit of a notation. It is standard, but let me explain you the mapping BI. So BI is a mapping which takes a capital theta. For each theta, BI gives you a set of thetas. So you can think in this direct mechanism, if my true type is theta, I can announce theta, theta prime, theta double prime. This is what this mapping does. Okay. And BI, the script BI is the set of all these mappings, where script B is the your cross product of BI. Okay. So think about this in the direct mechanism, what all states can you announce? Okay. Truth telling would be where, if you are a truth teller, then you will say if theta, then theta. That's it. That's your constant mapping with theta. That's your truth telling, which is which we assume if we are doing partial implementation. Okay. And BIT is basically saying that all the betas, all the generic elements should include truth telling so you will always say the truth, but maybe something more. But it cannot happen that the state is theta and you never say theta. That is not allowed in this set BIT. Okay. So this allows me to define a domain which I call BT, where BT is basically the cross product of BITs. So this takes all the mappings for each agent, which includes truth telling, and I take a cross product of them. Okay. Now, here is my algorithm. So suppose F is implementable by some mechanism D. Okay, I want to arrive at a necessary condition first. Okay, what do I need from my F? So F is implementable by some augmented direct mechanism D. Assume, I'm making one assumption that this truth telling is a Nash equilibrium in this D. Okay, whatever I'm assuming on the way is not required. This is a technical part of the proof, which will say that this is all without loss of generality. But this is what is happening. So assume that beta t theta is a Nash equilibrium in D. Now, given my definition that F is implementable by D and SD theta is contained in capital theta cross product of capital theta I over I, BT theta must be contained in SD theta. Right? This is every Nash equilibrium is a rationalizable strategy profile, but not the other way. Okay. Now, what do I know? Since D implements F, I at least know for every M in my message profile in this augmented direct mechanism, if there is a theta tilde such that this message profile belongs to beta t theta tilde, okay, then G of M should be equal to F theta tilde because F is implemented. Because this message profile will lie in SD theta. Therefore, this outcome must be F theta tilde. Okay, so basically what's happening is that given 1 and 2, I know something about the outcome function without knowing the mechanism. I don't know the outcome function, how it is defined in all other parts of the game. I don't know that, but I know this much. Now, beyond 3 and 4, how can I proceed? Beyond 3 and 4, we have no further knowledge of the outcome function. Okay, here comes my mapping. So using 3 and 4, I can update my outcome function, my knowledge of the outcome function, by computing the best response sets at each state theta that are generated by BT. So now I know that there is a Nash equilibrium, truth telling is a Nash equilibrium. So at each state, truth telling is a Nash equilibrium. Okay, suppose there are two states, one is theta and the other is theta prime. Okay, it can happen that when the true state is theta, announcing theta prime is also a Nash equilibrium at theta. Okay, so then I have a one best response set, which is a cross product of these. Okay, so in this sense, I need to basically write down, I can learn that given this beta t in this mechanism, without knowing the outcome function beyond 3 and 4, what more can I say? I can say the following, that this mapping. So now I can basically for any beta. So right now we are just thinking with beta t, but for any beta, I can define this mapping, which is basically very similar to the solution concept, where Ri beta theta is the intersection of Ri L beta theta over L, where for each of these element is defined recursively, where R beta theta L at theta is saying that at Lth stage, I will announce a theta prime if there is a theta minus I, so an announcement of my opponent, which has survived till L minus I, and theta prime is a best response to theta minus I. And this is the definition of best response, which is more technicalities. I don't think I have time for this. But the main idea is that given a beta, I can calculate. So here I only know that this mechanism has SD theta, and I know one very fine best response set, truth telling. But using this truth telling and my mapping, which basically uses this existence of Nash equilibrium to update my best responses. Okay, so I am going to skip this part, but let me continue with what we did. So with 3 and 4, I can update G by computing the best response sets at each theta. Okay, the best response set R beta. So what R does is it takes a beta t, it gives me a new beta. Okay. This R beta t is basically what? It is also a best response set at theta. And given the definition of rationalizability, R beta theta must be in S d theta. Okay. So therefore, now again, I know that D implements F. So now I have updated my outcome function. I know that now my outcome function must give me GM of F theta tilde for any message which is inside R beta T theta tilde. So instead of BT theta tilde, now I have to think about RBT theta tilde. So it's a larger, my outcome function is, I know more about the outcome function beyond what I knew about when I just took the finest partition or the finest truth telling BT. Okay. The final thing is that since D implements F for any theta and theta prime, it must such that F theta is not equal to F theta prime. It must hold that RBT theta intersection RBT theta prime is empty, because otherwise the reason is this. Since SD theta, since suppose F theta is not equal to F theta prime, I know that SD theta intersection SD theta prime must be empty, because otherwise the players are giving the designer the same message at both theta and theta prime, but the designer wants to do two different things. It cannot happen. Okay. Now, since RBT theta is contained in SD theta and the other one is contained in SD theta prime, three holds. Okay. Now, basically, the idea is the following. You take BT, you get a B1, beta 1. You update the outcome function using beta 1. The next step, you update the outcome function using beta 1. Using beta 1, you update the function by R beta 1. So you recursively basically keep on updating your outcome function till you get convergence to a beta star. Okay. Now let me tell you why this convergence will happen. Basically, yes.
That is what I mean by a fixed point argument. That
yes. I start. Yeah.
It's updating betas. And
yes, it is updating my. Yeah.
So I guess you need to prove some conditions on that operator
So,
that's updating.
So yeah, so this is the slide which I am telling you. So R, first of all, you know, when I define this mapping, this R is well defined. It takes a beta in R BT, gives you me a back beta in R beta in BT. Okay, so it's this self map is well defined. We show in the paper that this R is monotone, and then BT is a complete lattice, just by definition. Therefore, and now you define this. Now, first of all, with point 1 and 2, the definition of the conditions of Tarski's fixed point theorem are satisfied. So fixed point theorem will always exist. Okay. Yeah.
Which point theorem?
The Tarski's fixed point theorem.
I see.
Now, I can even say further. So you take this sequence, you take beta 0 as beta t, and construct a sequence where beta 0 is beta t, beta k is R beta k minus 1. So you have beta 0, beta 1, beta 2, beta 3. Each is, the recursive, you are continuously recursively applying this mapping R to generate this sequence beta k. Okay. Now, since R is monotone, this beta is an increasing sequence which converges to beta star because this space is bounded. Okay, and this beta star is my candidate. So what I did here is that with this approach that I start with truth telling, update by mechanism, I will at the end reach a beta star where I stop learning after that. After that beta star, I will stop learning. And this is my iterated monotonicity. I want a beta star. Eventually, I will stop learning. So this is the maximum I can extract out from augmented direct mechanism. After this, I cannot extract more information.
So the monotonicity is of the operator.
Yes, R. Yes.
And because the space within which you are doing these iterations is bounded, it will converge to.
Yes.
Okay, I see.
And also, okay, this extra information not required here. So this is a iterated monotonicity. Of course, this is the maximum information I've received. So I can just define this. F is iterated monotonic if for every theta prime, this thing holds, this 4 holds basically for beta star. Beta star is specifically defined as the limit of this sequence. Okay, because yeah, and this is our theorem. So
we have like 11 minutes, Ritesh. So
yeah, okay,
you can
yeah.
you have an example that we could look at, or
we are, this is a pretty much work in progress. So we are still finding the right example to. So this is the first time actually I could present. I'm presenting in this this way of arriving at the condition. So it's an iterative approach.
I see.
So but yeah, but I can try to probably I've given a very fast or a, overview. But the basic logic is you start with these augmented mechanisms. More or less everybody is doing like this, but we are able to get the get a more computational point or computational way of solving the problem. So yeah, so that's, I think, the one of the conceptual advantage, I think, of our approach. Well, I don't have much, because in necessity I just want to say that I have assumed a lot of assumptions in getting to IM. So I have not shown you whether IM is necessary or not, but in the paper we show that these assumptions do not matter. Our arguments do not rely on this assumption when we prove, but this is the conceptual insight. So right now the arguments are technical, but I think there is one line argument to directly show that why doing this thing is without loss of generality. Still able to figure that out. For the sufficiency, you take a beta. What we do is we take a beta star and we design the rest of the game in such a way that beta star is actually equal to your SD theta for each theta. This is the generalization of the BMT's mechanism. So the rest of the countable part of this big space of mechanisms is something which can be handled. So it's really about getting this beta star. The rest of the things is okay. For at least 3 agents, I can say something that with respect to Xiang provides a condition called group monotonicity double star. They are different conditions, but we both are getting at the same thing. The big difference between the 3-agent literature and our literature is that if you look at the 3-agent literature and translate their condition into IM, then what they are saying is that there exists a beta hat and a mapping such that R beta hat is equal to beta hat. But they do not give any guidance on how to find this fixed point, because this fixed point problem can be, they can be a curse of dimensionality here, because the space of this beta t in my domain can be very, very big. So if you keep searching for all possible betas in a random way, it's not clear when will you find one. So in that sense, computationally, we are able to solve this problem. Yeah, so this is the summary, I mean, for the literature, that we provide a condition which works for at least 2 agents. Xiang provides it for at least 3 agents. We show that both the conditions are equivalent. Like IM is, it has to be, because we are both doing the, but we also have a direct proof. But our approach has a more computational aspect to it. Yeah. So yeah, if you have to summarize, we provide a unified condition, and we believe that our techniques will be useful to extend our results beyond the case of complete information and correspondences, for example. And the final point is that the existing conditions, they are not easy to check, because as I mentioned, that they all suffer from a curse of dimensionality. There is no specific linear path. I don't know in computer science how do you say it, but there is a specific path in which our mechanism searches for our IM searches for beta star. But in the existing literature, this is more ad hoc. Yeah. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ritesh. So we have time for some questions. Maybe
Yeah.
4 or 5 minutes if we want. But I guess Sriram and I have been peppering you with questions throughout. So
Eh, Yeah, I mean, if you, yeah, I mean, we have some examples. For example, for 2agent, we have a specific example, but you know, it's not right now. We are still figuring it out how to, because that example itself will take a lot of time to, you know.
right.
So because the condition itself, as you've seen, the condition is iterative. It's to define the condition, I need a lot of time. So how do I? It's a chicken and problem right now for us. That if I explain the example first, but how do I explain the condition through that example? So it's. But once now we understand the condition, so probably we'll get the example. So,
Right.
but yes, that is.
So you're assuming strict preferences in throughout? No, not at all.
No, that not here. Here it is completely general.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
That's nice.
So yeah, I mean, beyond the finiteness and countability assumptions, because this is just to do summations, otherwise we have to do integrals. So
see.
just to avoid the the measure whatever the math technicalities, beyond that, economics wise, we are not making a assumption, like from an economics conceptual point of view.
I see. Well, thank you, Ritesh. If there are no questions, then I think we should conclude now and we can discuss offline. So thank you everyone for attending. Thank you, Ritesh, for this very enlightening presentation. Okay, take care.